The suspected chemical weapons attack led to weekend missile strikes by the U.S., Britain, and France. U.S. officials say the strikes targeted Syria's chemical weapons facilities, but the Kremlin is denying that any chemical attack happened in Syria. Here's what Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told our partners at the BBC.
There is no proof that on the 7th of April, chemical weapons were used in Duma.
But there is proof.
Can you?
Emmanuel Macron and the French have made it quite plain. They have intercepts which show helicopter movements, Syrian government helicopter movements over Duma. They have pictures of gas canisters found at the site of the attack. They also have the record of the Syrian government over the last several years using chemical weapons. If you put all of that together, as far as the French, the Americans, the British are concerned...
I cannot be impolite to the heads of other states. And of course I cannot be impolite to the head of my state. But you quoted the leaders of France and UK and the United States. And frankly speaking, all the evidence which they quoted was based on the media reports and on social networks.
This comes as the Trump administration is considering imposing new sanctions on Russia for supporting Bashar al-Assad. They could target companies dealing with the Syrian president and his country's alleged chemical weapons program. For more on how the White House is reacting to the situation in Syria, let's bring in CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett. He joins me now from West Palm Beach, Florida. All right, so Major, Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley told our Margaret Brennan Sunday the U.S. will sanction Russia. Here's a bit of what she said.
Are there any consequences for Assad's patrons, Russia and Iran, who continue to protect him?
Absolutely. So you will see that Russian sanctions will be coming down. Secretary Mnuchin will be announcing those on Monday if he hasn't already, and they will go directly to any sort of companies that were dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons use. And so I think everyone is going to feel it at this point. I think everyone knows that we sent a strong message, and our hope is that they listen to it.
The White House later walked back those comments. Why the disconnect?
Well, it's hard to know for sure. It's described by some in the White House as crossed wires, but that doesn't really make any sense, and it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Nikki Haley is the UN ambassador for the United States. She is not an inexperienced political figure, and she's not inexperienced in speaking on behalf of this administration. And what she did yesterday on Face the Nation, telling Margaret Brennan there would be more sanctions, she was speaking on behalf of another cabinet member, Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. You don't do that in the American government, even in the unique approach that the Trump administration takes, unless you believe that is the unified policy of the government. This morning, it was a walk back. Well, these sanctions are under consideration. They may be implemented in the future, but nothing nearly as declarative and as assertive as Nikki Haley said on Face the Nation. That means the policy was either changed or at least delayed. And really the only figure who can do that is President Trump, because that means some intervention occurred from the president, either to slow them down, to reevaluate them, or delay them for some extended period of time. That's all that we have to go on right now. The White House is only saying it's under consideration, but that's not what was said yesterday. And it was not said by someone who's inexperienced in this realm. So you have to believe, and all evidence points to, a shift overnight driven by the president.
Well, at Monday's event in Florida, the president introduced John Bolton and called the strikes in Syria, quote, a big successful hit. What do these airstrikes indicate about how John Bolton is settling into his new role as National Security Advisor?
Well, that he is exactly that, settling in. But one of the things that the National Security Advisor has to do, and the fundamental part of that job as it is constructed, and this goes to our earlier conversation, Elaine, coordinating all policy within all branches of the national security apparatus of the American government, State Department, United Nations, Pentagon, CIA, and the rest. And if there was any disconnect between Nikki Haley and the rest of the government, well, John Bolton would have been the one to resolve that. Maybe he helped resolve it when President Trump decided to slow down the Russia sanctions. Whatever, part of his job is to make sure that the government on national security matters speaks with one coherent voice. In the aftermath of the Syria strikes and this conversation about future Russia sanctions, that didn't happen. Settling in, yes. Fully settled in, no.
All right, Major Garrett traveling with the president in Florida. Major, thank you.